After the robbery, I found it impossible to rest in my own house. My pulse raced with terror and bitterness, prompting me to request a short stay with my son, only for him to respond icily, "I don't need an extra mouth to feed in my house." Hoping for comfort from my own kin, I encountered heartlessness instead. And when I showed up at his place without warning, I witnessed something that would shatter our family for good. Before we go on, please subscribe to the channel and share where you're tuning in from in the comments. The photo frame was smashed on the wooden floor, Ella's cheerful expression gazing up at me amid a network of cracked glass. My keys slipped from my shaking hands, rattling against the door jamb as I entered what used to be my familiar living space. The coffee table lay toppled like an injured creature. Magazines littered the ground like autumn foliage. Documents from my desk had formed a pale pathway toward the kitchen, and the quietness seemed off. Too profound, too vacant, lacking the usual buzz of household devices that should have welcomed me back. "What on earth?" The phrase slipped out in a murmur. My luggage hit the floor with a dull thump behind me. Shards of glass cracked under my footsteps as I ventured further into the disorder, every movement uncovering new intrusions. The media cabinet stood ajar, its racks emptied out, my TV missing. The sound system Ella had scrimped for 3 months to gift me on our anniversary disappeared. Then the odor struck me. Musty atmosphere blended with something nauseating. Not the cozy aroma of home I'd anticipated after a fortnight at my sister's in California. This was the scent of intruders, of unauthorized fingers handling all we'd created together. I lifted a ripped picture from the mess at my feet. Melvin's graduation from high school. His hat cocked jauntily, my arm draped over his shoulders. The edge was torn, dividing us in the shot. 23 years in this residence, never bothered to secure the rear entrance during daylight, hardly recalled to do so after dark. Ella always warned, "Silas, you're too trusting of folks." She'd been correct on that, as she was on most matters. The kitchen drawers gaped like wailing mouths. Utensils strewn over the linoleum. Cupboard panels askew. My coffee container tipped over, ground spilling dark blots on the pale countertops. They'd been meticulous, systematic. This wasn't haphazard vandalism. This was a deliberate hunt. My limbs wobbled as I ascended the staircase, clutching the railing with blanched knuckles. Each riser amplified my apprehension, deepening my grasp of how thoroughly my haven had been desecrated. The bedroom stole my breath. Our bed sagged partially off its base. Bureau compartments dumped onto the rug. Ella's music box, the one that chimed "The Way You Look Tonight," rested tilted, mute and hollow. Her wedding band, the pearl studs from her mom, all the small keepsakes I'd preserved for their lingering fragrance of her, vanished. But it was the office that fractured something within me. The safe's panel dangled open like a gash, its contents plundered. My dad's gold timepiece handed down across 3 generations. The backup funds Ella had urged us to stash for emergencies. The investment bonds we'd chosen over lavish trips, figuring they'd aid Melvin eventually. Who could do such a thing? I uttered to the vacant space. Who even knew my hiding spots? The dreadful notion seeped in like rising chill. Someone familiar with this place, aware of the safe tucked behind my workstation, knowledgeable about the extra key's location, informed of my precise 2-week absence. I collapsed into my desk seat, the sole upright item in the area. My palms trembled as I grabbed the telephone, instinct directing my digits to the digits. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's steady tone steadied me. My residence. Intruders broke in. I just returned from California and it's all ruined. Are you in imminent peril, sir? Are the culprits still there? No, they've left. But they stole it all. They targeted exactly the right spots. We're sending units to your address now. Can you provide your location? As alarms blared afar, intensifying moment by moment, I sat amid the ruins of my serene existence. The waning afternoon rays poured through the panes, casting a golden glow on the havoc that appeared to ridicule the desecration of all I'd cherished. The noise of incoming aid blended with the resonance of my own statement. They targeted exactly the right spots. The alarms pierced the twilight as 2 squad vehicles rolled into my drive. I still gripped the phone, the operator's words a tether amid the turmoil. Officer Johnson stepped out first, a sturdy fellow with silvering hair who proceeded with the measured stride of one jaded by countless incidents. His junior colleague, Officer Martinez, toted a camera and forensics gear, already assessing the evident harm through my entry windows. "Mr. Mills, I'm Officer Johnson. "This is Officer Martinez. Are you hurt?" "No, just dazed." My words emerged odd, detached. Johnson's seasoned gaze scanned the living area, noting elements I'd missed. "Martinez, begin with shots of the access points and primary zones. Sir, I must request you wait outside during our brief safety check." From my entry stoop, I observed their methodical navigation of my home. Johnson inspected wardrobes and nooks while Martinez captured it all with precise snaps of his device. The bursts lit up spaces I'd inhabited for years, now alien terrains of ruin. "All secure," Johnson announced. "Mr. Mills, you may re-enter. Let's commence at the intrusion site." He guided me to the rear entrance where fractured timber near the latch narrated the tale. Compelled access, but subtly. Observe the wood manipulation. Required patience, proper implements. This wasn't an impulsive youth seeking fast money. Martinez crouched by the frame, applying powder for prints with exact care. The harm indicates expertise, professional or at least seasoned. We proceeded chamber by chamber, Johnson posing inquiries as Martinez gathered proof. Each breach stung anew as we documented it formally. "How long were you absent, Mr. Mills? And who was aware of your journey?" 2 weeks. I saw my sister in California. Informed my son, my neighbor Roy. Noted it to some folks at the market. I hesitated, pondering, but the prized possessions, they headed directly for them. How could they know about my dad's watch? "The safe's code," Johnson jotted in a compact notebook. "These burglars knew precisely where to search. That implies acquaintance with your dwelling. Any current conflicts? Anyone nursing a vendetta?" "I'm retired, officer. I stay low-key. Assist my neighbors when possible. I can't fathom who'd commit this." Martinez glanced up from imaging my depleted safe. "No aimless wreckage here. They sought particular goods, ornaments, money, gadgets, yet left kin photos dispersed, not ruined, almost as if enraged, but with some control. The kitchen surface turned into our hub. The lone spot spared the mayhem. Johnson laid out paperwork while Martinez inputted data on his device. "We'll require a full tally of absent items," Johnson clarified, pen poised. "Begin with the priciest ones." The roster expanded as we conversed. The TV, audio setup, my dad's timepiece, Ella's ornaments, the reserve funds, even my quality tools from the shed. Each entry felt like another fragment of my world ripped off. "Mr. Mills." Johnson's manner softened. "I must inquire about relatives. Any money woes? Anyone desperate for quick cash?" The query struck like a strike. "My son Melvin is a mechanic. He's faced tough spells, but he'd never—" I couldn't complete the thought. Martinez peered up from his screen. "Occasionally those nearest stun us. Not claiming it's kin, but we must explore every angle." They wrapped up as night enveloped the area. Johnson gave me a file number on formal stationery detailing the probe steps, the subsequent actions, the low odds of retrieval. "One additional point," Johnson mentioned as they readied to depart. "You should think about lodging elsewhere this evening. Sometimes offenders come back, particularly if they suspect they overlooked something." Martinez agreed. "Replace your locks tomorrow for sure, and perhaps add an alarm setup." I lingered in my threshold, viewing their rear lights fade into the gloom. The residence seemed altered now, not merely breached but formally labeled, handled, distilled to identifiers and proof markers. The hush deepened further. Dust for prints blanketed my furnishings like soot, and caution tape designated zones I mustn't touch. My abode had transformed into an offense location, and I was now formally a casualty. But Johnson's phrase lingered in my thoughts. "Acquaintance with your dwelling." Someone versed in my routines, my caches, my timetable. The awful likelihood I'd evaded abruptly appeared less awful and more unavoidable. The patrol units vanished around the bend, abandoning me to the debris and the mounting fatigue. 2 weeks of journeying, hours of psychic distress, and now this empty quiet that pressed on my senses. I tried to impose some structure, writing a light fixture here, piling strewn volumes there, but each minor attempt exposed 10 more offenses. Jagged photo holders sliced my digits, flipped pieces too burdensome for my elderly spine. The pointlessness crushed me. My frame throbbed from the trip, from stooping over forms, from the strain that gripped my neck since spotting Ella's broken image. The place felt hazardous now, tainted by foreign touches and dubious intents. I required aid. For the initial time in 5 years since Ella's burial, I needed to depend on another. My device was concealed under dispersed files from my workspace. I unearthed it beneath a stack of aged fiscal records, its display fractured yet operational. The directory seemed unfamiliar beneath my quivering touch. When had I grown so secluded that phoning my own offspring demanded bravery? The line trilled thrice before Melvin picked up. Dad. His tone rang peculiar, strained with an indefinable element. Why the late call? Melvin, son, something awful occurred. My home was burgled during my California stay. Quiet extended between us. In the backdrop, TV sounds. Wendy's words inquiring something indistinct. Burgled, he eventually uttered. Are you all right? Physically, yes, but the place is wrecked. They grabbed everything. Your grandma's ornaments, grandpa's timepiece, even the TV. I can't remain here tonight. Might I come by? Just for a couple days till I sort it. The delay seemed infinite. When he replied, his voice held a sharpness I'd never detected. Dad, listen. I can't assist now. I've got my issues. The statement landed like a smack. In 35 years, through each youthful ordeal, every bruised joint and shattered romance, every monetary hardship of his young adulthood, I'd never heard him address me thus. But I'm your dad. I merely need a sofa for a few evenings until I said no. His manner hardened, nearly panicked. I don't need another mouth to feed currently. Get a motel or whatever. Melvin, please. This is your boyhood residence. Someone desecrated all your mom and I constructed. I need kin now. Well, kin isn't always available when required, is it? The resentment in his tone stunned me. You'll manage. You always do. The connection severed. I gazed at the device, reliving the exchange in astonishment. His mom would have been mortified. We'd reared him superior to this, instilled values of devotion, of supporting family, of uniting in hardship. But something in his tone troubled me. Not merely harshness, but dread, perhaps remorse, like a youngster snared in deceit who strikes out to dodge fallout. No, his own offspring refused. The residence grew chillier now, the breaches profounder. Tangible losses were one matter. Screens could be repurchased, adornments mere alloys and gems, but this sliced into something core. 35 years of celebrations and sports matches, of tended injuries and tuition covered without grudge, and this was kin's reply when trouble hit. I collected some fresh garments from my chamber floor, crammed them into a duffel that had oddly dodged the turmoil. My spine complained as I stooped for stray hosiery and undergarments, but bodily discomfort paled against the empty pang in my core. The entry portal seemed weightier than normal as I drew it shut. Each stride across my lawn to Roy's carried defeat's burden. The stoop lamp next door shone like a signal, offering the compassion my blood had withheld. As I traversed the crisp night breeze, one idea looped repeatedly. Melvin's tone had rung false, not just mean but frantic, like one persuading himself as much as me, like one bearing a grave hidden truth. Roy's entry swung wide before my fist could wrap. His rugged features, etched with worry, emerged in the amber glow like a beacon guardian greeting a tempest-battered mariner. Silas, enter. Enter. He moved back, motioning me into his simple parlor. I spotted you approaching. Authorities already quizzed me on all about the incident. The coziness of his abode wrapped me like a tangible hug. Unlike my ravaged refuge, Roy's spot felt secure. Faded furnishings aligned with soldierly order. Snapshots of his duty era arrayed on ledges, all in precise spots. What an awful event, he went on, claiming my duffel. In this community. 23 years as neighbors, and I never imagined such would strike our block. Relief surged within me. Here was one who comprehended, who offered care without stipulations or harsh denials. Naturally, you'll bunk here, Roy stated, fetching linens from a corridor storage. Should have suggested sooner, but I assumed kin would. Well, forget that. He arranged the sofa with soldierly speed, each cushion placed precisely. In moments, he had a suitable rest setup ready and was ushering me to his galley. Coffee, tea, or stiffer? Roy drew seats around his compact board. You appear as if you've endured a battlefield. Coffee'd be ideal. I dropped into the proffered spot, abruptly conscious of my body's aches. Roy acted with intent, activating the brewer, fetching cups from impeccably sorted shelves. The routine of welcome eased something tender inside. I shared all I recalled with Officer Johnson, he remarked, sitting opposite as the brew percolated. About spotting your Melvin's Honda at your spot several times this week. My gaze lifted sharply. Tuesday morn, I believe, and perhaps Thursday eve, Roy affirmed, decanting hot coffee into our vessels. Fine lad, watching over his father during your absence. I signaled, but he looked rushed, likely concerned for you voyaging solo at your years. The brew heated my palms, but Roy's remarks ignited another warmth in my torso. Pride blended with bewilderment. He's ever been watchful, I uttered gradually. His mom instilled family care in him. Wise lady, your Ella, bless her memory. Roy lifted his cup in a minor toast. She'd beam seeing how he guards you. Yet as I assented, something tugged at my mind's fringes. If Melvin had inspected the house, why omit it in our call? Why act so odd, so guarded? I'm pleased he monitored the place, I concluded. Renders this affair more baffling. Roy inclined nearer, dropping his voice intriguingly. Just us, I reckon this was experts. How they pinpointed what to snag. How stealthy they operated. Not frantic youths after easy funds. You believe? 26 years in uniform hones your situation reading. Someone orchestrated this meticulously. Knew your patterns. Knew your departure timing. He halted, tasting his drink. Query is, who possessed that knowledge? The inquiry lingered between us like haze. I pondered, all aware of my California venture. The store attendant who'd bid safe journey. The postal worker I'd requested to pause mail. My sibling, naturally, but she resided 2,000 miles distant. And Melvin. This seemed so premeditated, I confessed, as if the perpetrator had observed, studied my ways. Roy assented somberly. Precisely what I conveyed to the cops. Reminded me of recon ops. Systematic, exhaustive, enduring. We lingered in easy quiet. Two elders seeking sense in senseless breach. Outdoors, the locale eased into nocturnal calm. Stoop lamps forming safety puddles in the shadows. I'll aid your cleanup tomorrow, Roy proposed. No point tackling that alone. I value that deeply. The phrase emerged gruffer than planned. What are neighbors for? Roy's grin was sincere, straightforward. Plus, I aim to examine their entry method. Might bolster my own defenses post this. As I readied for slumber on Roy's cozy sofa, his words resounded. Someone orchestrated this meticulously. The notion ought to terrify, but it oddly sharpened me. 30 years engineering schooled me every issue has resolution. Every enigma holds hints for uncovering. Someone had breached my abode, pilfered my recollections, and I'd somehow uncover whom. The final recall before rest overtook was Roy's benign note. Fine lad watching his dad. Dawn delivered unforeseen sharpness. Roy's brew, his true solicitude and solid rest had revived my logical faculties. Post-meal, I'd organized my ideas, listing tasks, contacts, but one priority topped my inner list. Proper chat with Melvin. His row home nestled in a complex past its prime. Humble abodes for budding households. I'd assisted the initial payment 3 years prior. Proud my boy forged his path, his destiny. Now stationing in his slim drive, I noted overlooked details. Flaking color near sills, a minor fissure in the entry step. The grass begged care. Circumstances tougher than admitted. I hit the buzzer and lingered. Noises from within. Stirring, perhaps talk, but no prompt reply. At last, steps neared and the portal revealed Melvin's visage, ashen and surprised. Dad, what? Why are you here? His response jarred me. This wasn't a son's welcome worried for his parents' plight. This was the reaction of one unprepared, maybe undesired. Greetings, son. Apologies for the surprise visit, but we must converse. I examined his features, marking the shadows beneath his eyes, his repeated backward glances. After last evening's talk, I figured we should resolve things. Yeah, fine. Enter, I suppose. The parlor seemed tight and messy. Periodicals spread over a low table, crockery on all ledges. Melvin shifted with jittery vigor. His eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal seeking escape routes. Tell me about these visits to check on the house, I said carefully. What exactly were you checking? Just, making sure everything looked normal, that nobody was bothering the place. And did everything look normal? The pause stretched too long. Yeah, everything was fine, but nothing about this conversation was fine. Every answer felt rehearsed. Every gesture calculated to deflect rather than inform. This wasn't the son I'd raised. The boy who used to confess his smallest infractions with tears in his eyes. Melvin, what's wrong? And don't tell me it's just the burglary. Something else is eating at you. He stood again, this time heading toward the kitchen. I need some water. You want anything? As he disappeared around the corner, I found myself analyzing our exchange like a failed engineering project. Every question had produced evasion. Every attempt at connection had been rebuffed. My son was lying to me, but about what? The sound of running water gave me a moment to study his living room more carefully. Bills stacked on the end table, some with red overdue stamps. A gaming magazine opened to an article about poker strategies. Empty beer bottles lined up behind the couch. When Melvin returned, glass trembling slightly in his hand, I made one more attempt at direct communication. Son, if you're in some kind of trouble, you can tell me. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. His laugh came out harsh, almost bitter. Trouble? What kind of trouble could I be in, Dad? The question felt like a challenge, but I couldn't understand the rules of whatever game we were playing. I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Melvin sat back down, but his entire body remained coiled like a spring under tension. Every few seconds, his eyes would flick toward the mantelpiece, then quickly away, as if checking on something he didn't want me to notice. Melvin excused himself to the kitchen again, muttering something about needing to check on dinner preparations. The house felt too quiet with his nervous energy removed, like the moment between lightning and thunder when the air itself holds its breath. I sat back in the uncomfortable chair, letting my eyes wander around the cluttered living room. Bills, magazines, empty bottles, the debris of a life that wasn't going according to plan. Poor kid was clearly struggling more than I'd realized. My gaze drifted to the mantelpiece where a few framed photographs sat beside some decorative items. Melvin as a child grinning gap-toothed at a baseball game, his wedding day arm around Wendy in her simple white dress, a few knickknacks that looked like flea market finds, and a watch. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable. Just another piece of decoration among the accumulated possessions of a young couple trying to make their house feel like home. But something about its profile, the curve of its case, made me look twice. The brass face caught the afternoon light streaming through Melvin's windows. The leather band worn soft with age and handling. The distinctive shape of the winding crown that had been slightly bent since 1987, when 10-year-old me had dropped it while trying to wind it in secret. My heart stopped. I rose from the chair slowly, my legs feeling disconnected from my body. Each step toward the mantelpiece required conscious effort, as if I were walking through deep water. Please be wrong. Please let this be some terrible mistake. But as I drew closer, more details emerged with sickening clarity. The small scratch on the crystal face where I'd carelessly bumped it against a doorframe in my childhood. The patina on the brass case that came from decades of handling by loving hands. The inscription on the back that I couldn't see but knew by heart. To William Mills, faithful service, 1943, 1978, my father's watch, my grandfather's legacy. The timepiece that had been passed down through 3 generations of millsmen, meant someday to rest in Melvin's hands through proper ceremony, not theft. The room seemed to tilt around me. Blood rushed in my ears like ocean waves, and I gripped the edge of the mantelpiece to keep from falling. 35 years of fatherhood collapsed into a single devastating moment of absolute clarity. My own son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, to throw a curveball, to treat people with dignity and respect. The young man I'd sent to college, helped buy a house, welcomed into my heart every single day of his life he had robbed me. The scratch from when I dropped it at age 10, I whispered to the empty room, "There's no doubt." Footsteps approached from the kitchen. Melvin's voice called out, "Dad, everything okay out there?" I forced myself to move away from the mantelpiece to return to my chair with what I hoped looked like casual movement. But my hands shook as I gripped the armrests and my breathing came in short, sharp bursts. "That's a handsome watch on your mantel," I said when he reappeared, my voice sounding strange and distant even to my own ears. Melvin glanced over casually. Too casually. "Oh, that old thing. Picked it up at a pawn shop downtown." The lie hit me like a physical blow. Not just the theft, but the ease with which deception rolled off his tongue. "Looks like an antique." "Good quality." "Yeah, got it cheap." Guy probably didn't know its value. Each word twisted the knife deeper. My own flesh and blood looking me in the eye and lying about stealing his great-grandfather's watch. The watch that should have been his inheritance. His connection to family history and honor. Well, I managed, standing on unsteady legs. I should probably head back. Roy's helping me clean up this afternoon. Melvin seemed almost relieved at my departure. "Sure, Dad. And again, sorry about last night. I'll call you later. See how you're doing, anotherly." We both knew he wouldn't call. The walk to my car felt like a journey through quicksand. Each step required tremendous effort, and the world around me seemed muffled, distant. I fumbled with the keys, dropped them twice before managing to start the engine. As I pulled out of his driveway, I caught a glimpse of Melvin in his front window, not waving goodbye, not showing concern for his robbed father, just watching, making sure I actually left. My own son, my own flesh and blood. How could he look me in the eye? The drive back to Roy's house passed in a blur of automatic reflexes. Turn signals, stop signs, traffic lights that I navigated without conscious thought. My mind churned with terrible mathematics. The timing of my trip. The knowledge of my hiding places, the surgical precision of what had been taken. Everything I'd taught him about honor, about family, about standing up for what was right, all meaningless. By the time I parked in Roy's driveway, one thing had crystallized in my mind with absolute clarity. If Melvin thought he could destroy everything his mother and I had built together, steal from his own family and walk away untouched, he had seriously underestimated what his old man was capable of. The boy had made the worst mistake of his life. Roy's borrowed Camry felt foreign beneath my hands as I gripped the steering wheel outside Melvin's townhouse. The key turned in the ignition with a mechanical click that seemed unnaturally loud in the afternoon silence. The scratch from when I dropped it at 12 years old? There's no mistaking it. Traffic moved around me in a blur of color and motion, while my mind replayed the devastating moment of recognition, the distinctive bend in the winding crown, the patina that came from decades of loving handling, my father's inscription hidden on the back but burned into my memory. He pulled over at a gas station, hands trembling too violently to maintain safe driving. Customers walked past my windshield, living their normal lives while mine crumbled into fragments. 35 years of fatherhood reduced to a single undeniable truth, sitting on my son's mantelpiece. The engine idled as I sat there, breathing deeply, trying to process what felt impossible to accept. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe someone had sold it to him legitimately. But the timing, his nervousness, those visits Roy had mentioned, everything pointed toward one horrifying conclusion. 20 minutes passed before I trusted myself to continue driving. The streets of Omaha blurred past like watercolors in rain, familiar neighborhoods becoming foreign landscapes through my shock-clouded vision. Roy was working in his garden when I pulled into his driveway. He looked up with a smile that faded immediately when he saw my face. "Silas, you look like you've seen a ghost." The talk with Melvin didn't go well. "Something's not right, Roy." The words came out horsaro, scratchy. "I can't explain it yet, but something's very wrong." He set down his pruning shears, brushing soil from his hands. "Family troubles can be the hardest kind. You need to talk about it." "Not yet. I need to be certain first. Need to check some things." Roy studied my face with the sharp eyes of someone who'd learned to read people under pressure. "Well, you know where to find me when you're ready. Coffee is always on." Inside his guest room, I lay on the narrow bed staring at water stains on the ceiling. The watch image replayed endlessly. Brass face catching afternoon light. Leather band worn soft with age. Sitting there like an accusation among the scattered possessions of my son's modest life. But doubt gnawed at the edges of my certainty. 35 years of raising him, teaching him right from wrong. Was it all meaningless? Had I failed so completely that the boy who once cried over stepping on an ant could rob his own father? The engineer in me demanded proof beyond emotion. Evidence that would stand up to scrutiny that couldn't be explained away or dismissed as coincidence. If I was going to destroy a relationship forever, I owed it to both of us to be absolutely certain. I pulled out a notepad and began making lists, a methodical approach to an impossible situation. Times, dates, opportunities, what had been stolen and where it might have gone, who might remember seeing what. The gambling magazine I'd noticed made sudden terrible sense. Bills with overdue stamps, Melvin's strange behavior, his desperate rejection when I'd asked for help. The pieces formed a pattern I'd been too trusting to see. But I needed more than patterns. I needed proof that would satisfy a court of law, because that's where this was heading if my suspicions proved correct. 3 hours of planning later, I had a strategy. It would take time, patience, and the kind of methodical investigation that had served me well in 30 years of engineering problem-solving. If I was wrong, I would beg his forgiveness and spend the rest of my life making amends. If I was right, the boy who stole from his father would learn that his old man was capable of more than he'd ever imagined. The yellow pages felt brittle under my fingers as I searched for pawn shops across Omaha. Roy had lent me his car again, no questions asked. The kind of trust I'd once extended to my own son. 7 days of systematic investigation began with Pete's Pawn Palace on Dodge Street. The owner, a heavy-set man with suspicious eyes, examined the photographs I'd prepared carefully. "Yeah, I remember that watch. Vintage piece, real quality workmanship." He tapped the photo with a thick finger. Young guy, maybe mid-30s, seemed nervous as a cat. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Can you describe him more specifically?" "Dark hair, about 6 feet tall. Wearing work clothes, said it was his grandfather's watch but needed cash quick for some emergency." Pete's eyes narrowed. "Why you asking this about insurance or something?" "Something like that." I kept my voice steady. "Do you still have any paperwork?" The receipt copy showed a date. May 13th, 2 days into my California trip. The signature was illegible, but the physical description matched Melvin perfectly. $300 for a watch worth 10 times that amount. 2 more pawn shops yielded similar results. My television at Second Chance Electronics. Ella's jewelry at Golden Memories Consignment. Each transaction desperate, hurried. Items sold far below their value by a young man who fit my son's description perfectly. Mrs. Peterson, my neighbor 3 houses down, welcomed me into her kitchen with the enthusiasm of someone who rarely had visitors. "Oh yes, I definitely saw that Honda Civic on the 13th around 2 odd in the afternoon. Thought it was strange since you weren't home, but figured maybe Melvin was checking on things. Did you see the driver clearly? Not his face, but the build looked familiar. Young man moved like he was in a hurry, parked right in your driveway, bold as anything. The timeline aligned perfectly. While I'd been having lunch with my sister in San Francisco, my son had been robbing my house 3 time zones away. Security camera footage from the Hendersons showed a Honda Civic matching Melvin's license plate number. The timestamp read 2:17 p.m. May 13th, right in the window Mrs. Peterson had specified. Each piece of evidence felt like another nail in the coffin of my hopes. The methodical part of my mind cataloged every detail while the father in me died a little more with each confirmation. Friday evening, I followed him from the auto shop to Riverbend Casino, watched through the parking lot as he walked inside with the purposeful stride of someone feeding an addiction. 2 hours later, he emerged looking defeated, shoulders slumped, probably lighter by whatever money he'd started with. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Desperation had driven him to rob his own father, and here he was throwing away more money he didn't have. Back at Roy's kitchen table, I spread out everything I'd collected. Photographs, receipts, witness statements, timeline documentation. The evidence painted a picture so clear that even Melvin wouldn't be able to deny it. "The boy erased is gone," I whispered to the empty room. "This stranger who stole from me has taken his place." But it needed him to know that I knew, needed to look into his eyes when confronted with proof of his betrayal. Tomorrow I would drive to his house with this folder of evidence and watch him try to explain away the inexplicable. The watch was still sitting on his mantelpiece, waiting to serve as the final, undeniable accusation. Justice demanded truth, and truth demanded courage. Both waited for tomorrow's confrontation. The manila folder sat on my passenger seat like a loaded weapon as I drove toward Melvin's townhouse. 1 week of methodical investigation had produced evidence that would satisfy any court. Photographs, receipts, witness statements, timeline documentation that left no room for doubt or denial. Melvin answered the door with the same confused expression he'd worn during my previous visit. But this time I felt nothing but cold determination. "Dad, what brings you by again?" "We need to talk, son." "May I come in?" The living room looked exactly as I'd left it, cluttered, showing signs of financial stress and dominated by that brass pocket watch glinting on the mantelpiece like an accusation waiting to be voiced. I set the folder on his coffee table with deliberate precision. "Melvin, I know you robbed my house. I have proof." His face went white. "What? Dad, you're scaring me." "What are you talking about? Stop lying." I opened the folder, revealing the first photograph. "I have witnesses, receipts, documented evidence, and I have this." I pointed toward the mantelpiece where my father's watch caught the afternoon light. "I bought that at a pawn shop." "I told you. Pete's Pawn Palace, May 13th, $300. I slid the receipt copy across his coffee table. "Physical description matches you perfectly. Want to explain how your grandfather's watch ended up in a pawn shop 2 days after my house was robbed?" Melvin's hand shook as he picked up the receipt. His mouth opened and closed without sound like a fish pulled from water. "Here's Mrs. Peterson's statement about seeing your car in my driveway that afternoon. Another document joined the first security camera footage from the Hendersons, showing your license plate at 2:17 p.m. Dad, please. Receipt from Second Chance Electronics for my television. Golden Memories consignment for your mother's jewelry." Each piece of evidence hit Thettable with the finality of a judge's gavel. Should I continue? The breakdown came suddenly. Melvin collapsed into his armchair, face buried in his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs that sounded more like animal whimpers. "You don't understand. They were going to hurt Wendy. I owed $15,000 to people who don't accept payment plans. So you stole from your father instead of asking for help?" His head snapped up, eyes red but blazing with desperate justification. "You would have lectured me, given me one of your speeches about responsibility and poor choices." "You're right. I would have. But I also would have helped you. I was going to pay it back. Once I got ahead at Thedibles, I was going to buy everything back and you'd never know. The gambling delusion laid bare, always one win away from solving everything, never accepting that the system was designed to take everything he had. Instead, you violated my home, stole your mother's wedding ring, pawned your great-grandfather's watch for a fraction of its value. My voice stayed level, engineer steady. You looked me in the eye and lied about it. Melvin shot to his feet, desperation making him dangerous. You can't call the police on your own son. Watch me. I reached for my phone. You made this choice when you broke into my home. Mom would never forgive you for this. His voice cracked with hysteria. The words hit like a physical blow, but I stood firm. Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become. He lunged toward me then, trying to grab the phone. But 35 years of disappointment had crystallized into something harder than his desperation. He stepped back, finger already dialing. 911, what's your emergency? The voice from the phone cut through Melvin's pleas like a knife through silence. And in that moment, I crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's calm voice cut through Melvin's desperate pleas like a knife through silk. My finger remained steady on the phone, despite the trembling in my hands. I need to report a residential burglary. I have the perpetrator here with me, and I have evidence. Sir, is the perpetrator still on scene? Are you in immediate danger? Melvin lunged toward me, trying to grab the phone, but desperation made him clumsy. I stepped back, maintaining distance while keeping my voice level. The perpetrator is my son. He's not dangerous, but he's trying to prevent me from reporting the crime. 15 minutes felt like hours. Melvin alternated between frantic pacing and collapsed sobbing, occasionally making desperate attempts at negotiation. Dad, please think about Wendy. Think about your granddaughter we're planning. But the time for family considerations had passed. The brass watch on his mantelpiece caught the late afternoon light, a silent witness to betrayal that cut deeper than any wound. 2 patrol cars arrived with familiar efficiency. Officers Johnson and Martinez stepped out, their faces showing recognition as they approached the house. Mr. Mills, we responded to your burglary report 3 weeks ago. That's right, Officer Johnson. I've discovered who committed the crime. Martinez glanced between me and Melvin, professional assessment evident in his expression. This is the son you mentioned during the original investigation. Yes, I have comprehensive evidence of his guilt. Melvin's voice cracked as he appealed directly to the officers. This is a family dispute. You can't arrest someone based on their father's accusations. Johnson's expression remained neutral. Sir, we'll need to examine any evidence and make our own determination. The manila folder felt heavier than it should as I spread its contents across Melvin's coffee table. Each document, each photograph, each receipt told its part of the story with methodical precision. Pawnshop receipts showing my father's watch sold on May 13th. I began pointing to the evidence systematically, physical description matching my son exactly. Martinez photographed each item with his department camera. These look legitimate. We can verify with the establishments. Security camera footage from neighbors showing his vehicle at Meyer-Seidens during the burglary time frame. Another document joined the display. Witness statements placing him at the scene. Melvin's face had gone ashen. The reality of professional police scrutiny was clearly different from his father's emotional accusations. And here, I said, pointing toward the mantelpiece, is my great-grandfather's pocket watch sitting in plain view. Johnson examined the watch without touching it. This matches the description in your original police report. Exactly. Down to the distinctive scratch from when I dropped it as a child. The sound of a car door slamming outside interrupted our proceedings. Wendy burst through the front door, still wearing her work uniform, eyes wide with panic at the sight of patrol cars. What's happening, Melvin? Why are the police here? Her husband couldn't meet her eyes. Wendy, there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said quietly. Your husband robbed my house. I have proof. The scream that tore from her throat was pure anguish. She collapsed to her knees beside Melvin's chair, grabbing his hands. Tell them it's not true. Tell them you didn't do this. But Melvin's silence spoke louder than any denial could have. Officer Martinez finished documenting the evidence and conferred quietly with his partner. Their decision took less than 5 minutes. Melvin Mills, you're under arrest for residential burglary and theft of property valued over $1,000. The Miranda right sounded surreal, spoken in my son's living room, but the handcuffs clicking around his wrists were brutally real. Dad, please. Melvin's voice cracked as they escorted him toward the door. I'm still your son. That's exactly why this is necessary, I replied. Wendy's sobs echoed through the empty house as the patrol cars pulled away. I stood alone in the living room, staring at the empty space on the mantelpiece where my father's watch had been. The evidence was gone, confiscated for the legal process that would now unfold with inevitable precision. But the hollow feeling in my chest suggested that victory could be the most devastating defeat of all. 3 weeks had passed since the arrest, and sleep remained as elusive as the peace I'd expected to feel. Roy found me at his kitchen table again at dawn, nursing cold coffee and staring at court documents that had arrived in yesterday's mail. "If you keep this up, you'll waste away to nothing," he said, starting fresh coffee without being asked. The preliminary hearing notice felt heavy in my hands. July 15th, the date when my testimony would formally begin the process of sending my own son to prison. "Sometimes I wonder if Ella would understand," I admitted, the first doubt I'd spoken aloud. Roy sat across from me, bringing the warmth of human companionship to my isolated struggle. "Your wife was a wise woman. She'd see the principle behind the pain, but principles felt abstract at 3 in the morning when the weight of destroying my family pressed down like a physical burden. The house felt too quiet without normal life continuing around me." The district attorney's office occupied the 8th floor of a downtown building that smelled of old carpet and institutional coffee. Ms. Rebecca Chen, the prosecutor assigned to our case, greeted me with professional sympathy. "Mr. Mills, in 30 years of practice, I've never seen a father prosecute his own son with this level of documentation. Does that make it wrong?" "No, sir, it makes it extraordinary. The evidence is comprehensive. He'll likely accept a plea agreement to avoid trial." She spread photocopies of my investigation across her desk. Pawnshop receipts, neighbor testimonies, security camera stills. Each piece of paper represented hours of methodical work, but also another nail in the coffin of my family relationship. Residential burglary with theft over $1,000 typically carries 2 to 4 years. With his clean record and family circumstances, he'll probably get probation with mandatory counseling. The Douglas County Correction Center felt like stepping into another world. Metal detectors, visitor badges, guards who'd seen too much human weakness to be surprised by family betrayal. Melvin appeared behind reinforced glass wearing a range that made his complexion look sickly. Weight loss had sharpened his features, and his eyes held a bitterness I'd never seen before. "Are you satisfied now?" His voice came through the speaker with electronic distortion. "Seeing me locked up like an animal, I wanted you to face consequences, not become bitter." "What did you expect? That I'd thank you for destroying my life?" The conversation lasted 20 minutes and accomplished nothing, except to deepen my growing doubt. Prison was supposed to teach lessons, but the man across from me seemed to be learning all the wrong ones. Back in Roy's kitchen, I pushed food around my plate while he watched with growing concern. "You're questioning yourself. I can see it eating at you. What if I've destroyed any chance of redemption for him?" Roy's military background had taught him about tough decisions under pressure. "Silas, sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. But what if those consequences break him instead of fixing him? Then that's his choice too. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." The mail brought more legal documents, more court dates, more reminders that the wheels of justice ground forward regardless of a father's doubts. July turned into August, with a series of sleepless nights and conversations with lawyers who spoke about my son like he was a case number rather than the boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle. Public opinion in the neighborhood remained mixed. Some admired my principles, others questioned my family loyalty. Mrs. Peterson stopped speaking to me entirely after learning the full story. "People think they understand until it's their own child," Roy observed during one of our evening walks. Maybe they're right. Maybe blood should be thicker than justice. Or maybe justice is how we show love to people who can't see they need saving. The preliminary hearing came and went. Melvin accepted the plea agreement. 2 years probation, mandatory gambling, addiction counseling, community service, and full restitution for the stolen items. No prison time, no permanent criminal record if he completed the term successfully. Standing outside the courthouse afterward, I felt neither victory nor defeat. Just the exhausted emptiness of someone who'd fought a war with no winners. The court clerk handed me an envelope from the defendant, sir. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Melvin's handwriting. "Dad, the counselor says I need to understand why you did this. I'm trying. Maybe we can talk when I'm ready. Still your son, Mel." For the first time in months, I managed to sleep through the night. 6 months later, I stood in my empty living room surrounded by boxes marked Arizona in Roy's careful handwriting. The decision to leave Omaha hadn't been easy. but staying in the house where everything had started felt impossible. "You sure about this?" Roy asked, taping another box closed. "Running away never solved anything." "I'm not running. I'm choosing to heal somewhere new." The letter from Melvin sat on the kitchen counter, its edges worn from repeated reading. 3 pages of careful handwriting. The first real communication we'd had since the sentencing hearing. "Dad," the gambling counselor says, "I have to accept responsibility before I can make amends. You were right about the addiction controlling me. I see that now. The theft wasn't about the money. It was about feeding something that had already destroyed my judgment. I'm sorry it took legal consequences to make me understand what you tried to teach me my whole life. I know you didn't do this to hurt me. You did it because you love me enough to let me face the truth. I'm not ready to see you yet, but I wanted you to know that the counseling is helping. Maybe someday we can rebuild what I broke. Still learning how to be your son again, Melvin." Roy found me holding the letter. Tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed finally falling freely. "He gets it now," I said simply. Took him long enough. The moving truck arrived on a Tuesday morning that felt like rebirth. Arizona offered distance from painful memories and proximity to my sister, who'd been calling weekly since learning about the family crisis. "Any regrets about how you handled it?" Roy asked as we loaded the last boxes. The methods were painful, but the principle was right. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. Ella would understand. She always said, "Love isn't always comfortable." Roy's embrace at the airport felt like closure and beginning simultaneously. 23 years of neighborly friendship distilled into a handshake and a promise to stay in touch. "Take care of yourself, Silas, and don't wait too long to answer when that boy calls." The flight to Phoenix gave me time to think about justice and family, about principles and forgiveness. Somewhere over Kansas, I realized that the hardest part hadn't been calling the police on my son. The hardest part had been learning that love sometimes requires causing pain in service of a larger healing. Arizona welcomed me with clear skies and the kind of heat that bakes doubt out of a man's bones. My new apartment overlooked mountains that made human problems seem appropriately small. The watch returned to me after the court proceedings, sat on my nightstand next to Ella's photograph. 3 generations of millsmen had carried it, and someday, when Melbourne was ready, it would continue its journey. But first he had to finish learning the lesson I'd been too afraid to teach him, until crisis forced my hand. The phone rang on a Thursday evening 6 months after I'd settled in Arizona. The caller ID showed a number I recognized but hadn't heard from in over a year. "Dad, it's me." Melvin's voice carried new weight. The sound of someone who'd traveled through consequence and emerged changed. "Hello, son. I wanted to call on Mom's birthday. Thought she'd want us to talk today." She would have. I've been sober from gambling for 8 months. The counselor says I'm ready to start making real amends. How do you want to begin? The conversation lasted 2 hours. We talked about addiction and accountability, about justice and forgiveness, about the difference between enabling someone and loving them enough to let them fall. "I understand why you did it now," he said finally. "I hated you for it, but I understand. I never stopped loving you, Melvin. Not for 1 second. I know, Dad, that's what made it so hard to accept." When I hung up, the desert sunset was painting the mountains purple and gold. Tomorrow would bring another conversation, and the day after that another small step toward rebuilding what had been broken. Justice had been served. Now the real work of healing could begin. The watch ticked steadily on my nightstand, keeping time for a future where love and accountability could coexist, where tough choices led to stronger relationships, and where sometimes the greatest gift a father can give his son is the chance to face the consequences of his own choices. Ella's photograph smiled at me across the years, and I could almost hear her voice. "Well done, Silas, well done." If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.